Trustee Villalobos, will you lead the flag salute?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Trustee Burkini, can you read the land acknowledgement?
The Pacifica School District acknowledges that we gather on the unceded ancestral homelands of the Ramaytush Ohlone people. As guests, we humbly extend our gratitude to the Ramaytush Ohlone elders and community. We recognize that we benefit from living and working on their traditional homeland, and we affirm their sovereign rights as First Peoples. As the original stewards of this land, the Ramaytush Ohlone understand the interconnectedness of all things and the importance of maintaining harmony with nature. Likewise, Pacifica School District commits to teaching our school community how to be responsible stewards of this land.
Thank you. And Barbara, would you please take the roll call?
Trustee Berdal.
Here.
Trustee Burkini.
Here.
Trustee David is absent. Trustee Patel.
Here.
Trustee Villalobos.
Here.
Thank you.
The district digitally records the audio and video portion of the meeting. All recordings are kept in the superintendent's office for 30 days and are available during that time period for inspection by members of the public on district equipment without charge. In-person speakers wishing to address the board on agenda or non-agenda items, please complete the request card with your name, address, and the item number and submit it to the board president or the superintendent. You will be called to address the board and may speak for up to 3 minutes. Virtual speakers wishing to address the board on agenda or non-agenda items, please submit your first and last name and agenda item you wish to speak on in the Q&A area of the webinar. Please do not submit comments or questions in the Q&A area. You will be called to address the board. Your microphone will be unmuted, and you may speak up to 3 minutes. After you have spoken, your microphone will be muted. Report out on closed session topics. The board met in closed session regarding the employee performance evaluation, and no action was taken. Item 7, approval of the minutes of the November 3rd, 2021. Okay, are there any questions regarding the minutes of November 3rd, 2021 regular meeting? Okay, do I have a motion to approve the minutes of November 3rd regular meeting?
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes of November 3rd, 2021.
Okay, do I have a second?
No second.
Okay, all in favor?
Thank you. Motion passes 4-0.
Okay, approval of the agenda and consent agenda. All items in the consent agenda will be approved with one motion, which is not debatable, and which requires a unanimous vote for passage. If any member of the board, the superintendent, or public so requests, any item shall be removed from this section and placed in the regular order of business following approval of the consent agenda. Are there any questions regarding the agenda or consent agenda?
No questions, but just a quick comment, just saying congratulations to the new hires and the promoted employees.
Okay. And do we have a motion to approve the agenda and consent agenda?
A motion to approve the agenda and consent agenda.
And do we have a second?
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Motion passes 4-0.
Okay. Communications. Okay. Speakers wishing to address the board on agenda items or non-agenda items, please submit your first and last name and the agenda item you wish to speak on in the Q&A area of the webinar. Please do not submit questions or comments in the Q&A area. You will be called to address the board. Your microphone will be unmuted, and you may speak up to 3 minutes. After you have spoken, your microphone will be muted. LSCA?
No, Carla and Josie, you're letting.
Yeah, she's been promoted as panelist.
Can you hear me? Hello? Hello, hello? I think the screen is off. Can you hear me now? I'm not muted. Can you hear me? Hi, hi, hi. People at home can hear me. Hi, everybody at home. Hello? Hello, hello?
Whose computer is that? Because
Hi, hi. Oh. All right, we ready? Oh, okay. Are we now? Okay. Good evening. We look forward to negotiating on December. Hello? Is that good? Can you hear me? Hello? Hello, hello? Maybe someone at home, put in the chat, maybe turn off my video and I just do audio. Oh, can you hear me now? God. Meeting yesterday, we learned about a closed session meeting on Wednesday, January 5th from 2 to 5 around negotiations. Even though it is a closed session, you have a responsibility to start the meeting with public comment. Unfortunately, this would be during our contracted work hours, which would prohibit any ability for PSD employees to share their thoughts. Our next union meeting is Thursday, December 9th at 3:30, and we welcome you to attend. Thank you.
CA? Same problem. I don't see Nicole.
Yeah, I see her. Yeah, she's here.
You mean to put her in there?
I got her.
There she is. Hi, Nicole.
Hi, guys. Hello. Of CSEA. Welcome back. I hope everyone had a very enjoyable week off. I would like to let everyone know that our latest Above and Beyond recipient was Mr. Ron Douglas, a day custodian at Ocean Shore School. Ron was touched by the sentiment and asked how he could nominate someone else. I told him, just tell me who it is. And he said, I could not do that because I would have to nominate everyone I work with. The district and CSEA met yesterday and we discussed the openings in the technology department. I personally am sending a letter to all members to see if someone might know someone who might know someone with some of the needed qualifications, so we might fill the position sooner than later. In discussion with our e-board, we also discussed that possibly the district could reach out to the community college and San Francisco State University technology departments to see if there are some students who could come in part-time to help us and possibly want to apply for a position. Along those lines, our e-board also discussed creating a sort of computer kiosk for future applicants who may not have access to the internet or have a computer to apply for positions on EdJoin. The kiosk could also serve families from the district if they need to add money to their student lunch accounts in the future or need to request IT assistance for their students' Chromebook currently. The kiosk could be located somewhere at the DO, so someone could always be around to assist these individuals as needed. Good news, we were able to hire an LVN, and they will start on January 5th. The district will also hold a 2-day training for staff who are hired to run social play programs during lunch and recess for our students who return in January. CSEA will negotiate with the district on December 10th to discuss some issues that need to be addressed, and we are feeling positive that we will be able to come to agreements. That's all for now. Thanks for your time.
Thanks, Nicole. Thank you. And people wishing to address the board?
We do have one person, Paul Toda, regarding Arbor Day, and we'll bring him up now.
Okay.
Well, could you turn the TV up a little bit more?
Yeah, we have. Hear it?
That, this is coming from my computer.
Thanks. Oh, got it. We can.
Thank you for giving me time to speak tonight regarding Arbor Day. My name is Paul Toda. I'm part of Tree City Pacifica, a group of citizens who formed in 2019 to help preserve our existing trees, plant new trees, and advise the city on policies regarding our heritage trees. When we launched in 2019, we planted trees in front of the district office. Last year, the pandemic derailed our work with the schools, but this year proved fruitful in a number of ways. Our plan has always been to plant 20 trees in the community and 10 in the schools, and we achieved that goal last November. The Pacifica Garden Club, which also funded an additional 10 trees in Fairmont Park and Rec Center, helped at a number of the schools and reported that students were well prepared. Some teachers divided students into digging teams, watering teams, and mulching teams. Others worked to help students understand how trees get energy from the sun and that their root systems can be as large as their canopy. We also held an art contest, and all of the schools participated. One classroom focused specifically on the mirror aspect of the root system and canopy, and all the art helped students understand their relationship both to one specific tree and to all trees, and the help they provide in the fight against climate change. Even though a focus on climate change can be negative, your teachers made your students feel hopeful and positive with the realization that they can make a difference just by planting one tree. We hope to partner with you next year and in the years to come. On behalf of us at Tree City Pacifica, thank you.
Okay, so Billy, public comment?
There's not the only public comment. You keep going. I'm gonna sneak out and go look for a bigger speaker.
Oh, okay. Well, this was correspondence from you, so it's the next item.
No correspondence.
Okay, so board superintendent communications. Would you like to start?
Yes, I can start at no communications.
No communications. Go for it.
Oh, okay.
Nothing this time around either.
Okay. Had the workforce housing meeting with the city regarding the Odstad property, and helped with the vaccines for the 5 to 11-year-olds up at Sunset Ridge, and there were 500 signed up, and it went relatively smoothly, all things considered. A lot of paperwork and insurance, which is never fun for anybody, but we got past that. And then went to Soul Grind this morning for the SPED, for the get-together, the coffee get-together, and it was really nice to see how all the parents support each other. So I really appreciated being able to go. Laverne usually goes, but yeah, it was really an enjoyable morning to see how they work together. Okay, and we'll wait for Dr. Olson on that, or
You can keep going.
keep going? Okay. All right, district business. District goals. The district values the goals provided in our local control accountability plan and strategic plan. All of our district board agenda items are tied to these goals. One or more goals are listed in the description of each board agenda item. The details for each of those district goals can be accessed on our district website at www.pacificasd.org. Okay, item A, certification of first interim report for 2021-2022. Josie Peterson.
Thank you, Trustee Bradal. Will's going to bring the report up on the screen shortly. I'll go ahead and start. So the first interim report is our updated budget report, and you can go ahead, that's the contents. You can go ahead and go to the next page. Thank you. So it is an update of our budget, and it includes the spending as of October 31st. And then we also have projections for the rest of the school year to show us what our total budget projections currently are for the 2021-22 school year. This report contains the detailed budget statements as well as multi-year projections. And you can go on. I'm going to go through some of the differences. The last time the board approved the budget was in May of 2021. And so now the first interim report will show you an update of where we are. You can go ahead to, yeah, thank you, Will, to the COLA. So one of the biggest changes we have is when we prepared our budget, the state had not yet finalized their budget. So the COLA that we had included in our budget was 3.84%. That's in the first column. And then the second column, it shows you what the final state budget was when Newsom approved the budget. So it's actually an increase of 1.23% in our budget. And then it goes ahead and shows you the multi-year COLAs and the projected changes in the final state budget. Now those figures will change again in January when the governor comes forward with his January budget proposal. We can go ahead and move forward. So another, one of the biggest changes we're facing now is a change in how Pacifica School District is funded. The local control funding formula determines how school districts are funded. It's a state funding formula. It's really based on the average daily attendance of the students by grade level, and there's some additional funds for class sizes and students who are identified in various categories. Now, the difference in state funding and community funding is districts that are community funded receive more property taxes than the state calculation dictates. So a lot of San Mateo, not a lot, but several San Mateo County school districts have been flipping between LCFF funding and community funding, or what they used to call basic aid. And so this year, you can go ahead and move forward. Thank you, Will. Just recently, on November 15th, the San Mateo County Office of Education contacted us to let us know that Pacifica School District will flip into community funded this year, or what you call basic aid. And that's a result of other districts that had flipped. When a district flips, and then they flip back again, they're no longer eligible for supplemental property taxes. And so when there was 3 school districts that flipped last year. So this year they were not eligible for the supplemental property taxes, which means there was a larger distribution for those that were left. And so Pacifica School District received more property taxes, or is projected to receive, because this is the period 1. So these are their projections right now. There could be changes, but it's projected that we're going to receive more property taxes than what our ADA student enrollment to the LCFF formula comes up with. And so the calculation is currently $1.4 million into what's called community funded. We'll receive $1.4 million in what we had projected. So again, based on the county estimates, they're estimating that next year, Pacifica will flip back into what's called the LCFF funded category. And that's a result of us not receiving that large amount of supplemental property taxes. It's about 7.4 million is the current estimates. So it's really good news for this year's budget. It's challenging for us moving forward, because we're going to have a large increase in revenue this year, and then next year we're going to have a large decrease. So if you can go ahead and move forward. This is just a demonstration of the current revenue projections for Pacifica. And you can see the large red portion is now LCFF property taxes. We still do receive a small amount of state funds, and that's based on, back from 2012-13, it's what's called a fair share. When school districts are community funded, they still receive some amounts for some old categorical funds that the state had benchmarked back in 2012-13. You can see we receive very little federal revenues. It's only 4% of our budget, and other state revenues is 7%, and then local revenues 5%, which does include our parcel tax that the community approved for us. So we can go ahead and move forward. The next chart demonstrates how Pacifica spends its funds. And you can see that 76% of the budget does go to employee compensation. That includes salaries and health benefits and dental benefits. And then the other categories, it's broken down by certificated, classified, and administrators. So certificated is 49%, classified 20%, and administrators 7%. And then 4% goes to books and supplies. Other operating expenses is 19%, and then there's a small other 1%. And then please go ahead and move forward. So the next few pages are going to show you what our current budget projections are, and it's also going to show you what we had projected in May when you adopted the budget. The first column is the 2021 adopted budget, and it's broken out by unrestricted and restricted, and it shows all of the revenue and expenditure categories. And then there's a 21-22 where we are today. And I'm going to go ahead and move forward on this because the next few pages explains the differences. Unless somebody has questions about this page, I'll go ahead and go forward, please, Will. So the way you read this is you can see what the changes are from May until today. So for example, LCFF sources, in the adopted budget, we had just over $28 million. And now at first interim, it's just over $31 million. So the difference is the large increase in the supplemental taxes that were distributed to Pacifica School District. There's also some additional revenues, like special education revenues were higher than what we had projected. Then federal revenue, we had another large increase, and that really has to do with the COVID funds. When we were preparing our budget, we really didn't have the exact numbers for what they call ESSER II funding and some of the federal COVID funds. And so that's an increase of over 400,000. And then other state was a small decrease, again, based on some of the COVID fund estimates that we had back in May. And I do have some charts in the presentation that will show you exactly what COVID funding we received. So I won't go through, other revenue was a small change. If you don't mind going forward to the next page, Will. The next page is our expenditures, and the largest change here was we hadn't at the time we adopted the budget known about the salary increase for employees. So all employees received a 3% salary increase and an additional extra day of pay. And then again in classified there were some added positions, mostly due to COVID, some of the positions helping us with dealing with the COVID. And then employee benefits, there was increases in the STRS contribution, health and welfare, and fixed payroll. So one of the things that's always different in the first interim is our employee compensation. We don't know the exact staffing and enrollment in May, and so now what we have in our budget are the actual positions, the actual people in the positions, so it is a much more accurate picture of our budget today. So going on to books and supplies, you can see an increase because there was a lot of site carryover. From the prior year, it was about $300,000, and then there were also increases in COVID-related expenditures. Services and other, a lot of the COVID-related expenditures are in this category, and that's in the ESSER, expanded learning opportunity, the GEARS, and the in-person learning grant. Another large change was the child nutrition. It is now projected to be self-sustaining for the first time in many, many years. And that's because the state is funding us for every single lunch that we serve. So that's another positive for our budget. So going forward, the next chart is other district funds. So this page shows you all of the funds that Pacifica School District has. The general fund, it shows the beginning balance and the ending balance. You can see the large increase due to the $1.4 million of additional property taxes that we received. The Child Nutrition Fund basically is a break-even account. It's a restricted fund for food service. Deferred maintenance is a really low account balance, and that's the account where we use to fund the repairs. For example, when you see plumbing contracts come forward to you, or fencing, heating, electrical. And this account is really underfunded because we've had a lot of facilities repairs that are not covered with bond funds, and we didn't budget for these expenditures. So this is a fund where the state used to contribute $120,000, and the district used to match that amount. So the fund used to carry $240,000 to cover all of these unanticipated repairs. Currently, this is one area of need in our district. Fund 17 is the special reserve fund other than capital outlay. So that's really an additional reserve fund for the board has set aside. You cannot use these funds without the board transferring the money back to the general fund, or you could increase the reserve if the board determines they want to transfer funds from the general fund into this fund. And then retiree benefits, those are the funds set aside to cover the health benefits for our retirees when employees retire from our district and they meet certain criteria. The district pays for their retirement health benefits and dental for 10 years, or until a certain age. It's per contract language. The building fund, as you know, that's where our bond funds are, and we just we are funding another bond issuance, so this account will increase in the second interim report when those funds are received. And then Fund 25, capital facilities, this is the account when there's development in Pacifica or construction. The city collects a permit. In the permit process, there's a fee collected that goes towards the Jefferson School District and Pacifica School District. These are restricted funds, and we're working with CC, our bond manager, and King Consulting to work on spending these funds along with the facility master plan. And then Fund 40 is the reserve that was from the sale of a site, the old Fairmont site, and those funds have been set aside for the pre-development costs for workforce housing. The Heart loan is in this fund, and it's also the board's hope that there'll be some reserve for the workforce housing project. So those are all the different district funds. And then going forward, this is a very summarized version of our current multi-year projections. In the package, there's a very detailed analysis, but this is very summarized. It just shows you what our beginning fund balance was, for example, in 21-22, $4.1 million. And then the revenues, expenditures, it shows that we have an ending fund balance of $5 million. And then looking down at the blue row at the bottom, you can see the ending fund balance is declining, and that's because this year we received the extra property taxes, but next year there's two things that are going on next year. Next year, we're no longer going to be called community funded or basic aid, so we're going to lose the $1.4 million. And in addition, the state had given us, I forget what you call it, but we've been counting the attendance from 2019-20, our last year before COVID, and our enrollment, and we've been losing students. So we've been held harmless, that's what they've called it, held harmless until 2022-23. So in 2022-23, our LCFF calculator is going to reflect a loss of 300 students. And so we have two things going on that year, and we have a large deficit spending in 2022-23 because of those two things. And the COLA also is not projected to cover our operating expenditures in both of those two subsequent years. So we go down to a $2.4 million ending fund balance. So moving on to the next slides, this is really an update for the board on our COVID funding, because for the past 2 years, if you don't mind advancing, Will. The past 2 years, we've received a lot of one-time funds from both the state and the federal government. And so this chart really shows you all of the funds we've received since last year during our shutdown and continuing on into this year. So when you look at this, like the first category, learning loss mitigation, and I'll kind of go over how we spent these funds. In 2021, these funds are mostly all spent except for the GEARS, Government Emergency Learning Loss Relief Fund. There's still a little bit of a balance in that fund. And then in 21-22, I believe we brought the ESSA report to the board, and Will also brought the Expanded Learning Opportunity Grant to the board. These funds are currently being spent in accordance with those plans. And they're also posted on our website, the details of those plans. So this is a summary of all the funds. It's over $4.5 million. And then going into the next page, Will, really in year one, we really focused on employee safety, support for distance learning, one-time compensation for employees, a lot of technology, software, and supplies for employees and students, and our food service program, and we started working on small learning hubs. Year one was when we first came back in April, and so a lot of the focus was on distance learning and all of the needs of our employees and students. And then as we came back, we focused on students, small student learning hubs. And then going forward to the next slide, in year two, we're in year two, we're now focused on the return to safe in-person instruction. Still a lot of technology and instructional materials, expanded student learning, and added support for social emotional needs. And you'll see this in the plans that are on our website for both the ESSER funds and the Expanded Learning Opportunity funds. So we can go ahead and move forward. This is just really, we've brought this back to you several times. So you can see where Pacifica is in comparison to the state. The state elementary school district reserves are still in the 20% range, 22.7 in 1920. This hasn't been updated for a couple of years. It is recommended that school districts have about 17% of reserves. You want to be able to fund at least 2 months of your payroll. For Pacifica School District, that's $5 million. 2 months of payroll is about $5 million. So that would be 14%, which this year we're currently making that recommended reserve level. And then if we go forward, so kind of in summary with first interim, we are filing a positive first interim report, which means we are going to meet our financial obligations in the current year and 2 subsequent years. So we'll be sending to the county a positive certification if the board approves this tonight. And then just planning ahead and looking forward, we really need to, if you go to the next slide, Will, we really need to start now working on our enrollment and our staffing because we are down 300 students from what our funding level is this year. We need to plan for that, what they call the cliff year, which is next year. We're going to start working on second interim, which we'll bring to the board in March. And then we'll start working on our local control accountability plan and building our budget for 22-23 and in May, and then look to adopt those plans in June of 2022. So there's a lot of information in the packet. In the first couple pages, there's some state, there's the state certification page. And then it goes into talk about the criteria and standards that the state sets. And that's a couple pages there, 3 pages that I would really encourage people to look at because the state has standards and it lets you know when a district is going into fiscal instability or some sort of, some kind of indicators that would indicate for you to be paying closer attention to. And there are a couple categories that are not met in, of course, some of them were out of our control because of the LCFF funding change. But there's areas, declining enrollment is an area that's an additional fiscal indicator. Uncapped health benefits is another area because it's so unpredictable to account for those costs going forward. And you can take a look at that and let me know if you have any questions. All of the reports are attached. It's a lot of information, but I'm happy to answer any questions that the board might have.
Well, at the end of the road.
Madam Chair, I'm going to try to make this as brief as possible. This is very interesting for me, and really a lot of the questions are just so I can learn a little bit better. The first question I have is around the comment that you made around supplemental taxes. So am I to understand that the county pools supplemental taxes and then divvies them out to different districts? So it's not based on the supplemental taxes of Pacifica residents. It's pooled up to the county and then they split it?
Yes, it is San Mateo County. San Mateo, I don't know if other counties are the same, but the property tax distribution is a little bit complicated in our county, but you do have it. And just to note, the supplemental taxes are the taxes that are raised from changes in home ownership or new construction. And so there was a large increase there. But you're right, it is taken as a whole in San Mateo County, and they have a formula for distribution. It's even more complicated because there's a negative pot of property taxes that's distributed, and that's what also causes districts to fluctuate from year to year. But you do have, that's correct.
Okay, so what you just said is it's also all property taxes, not just supplemental. That's what you
Yeah, it's a complicated.
And then one other question that I have is, given the switch to basic aid, is the percentage that we are now over the revenue limit or what would have been the LCFF, is that the 1.4 million? That's how much we're over?
Exactly.
Okay.
Yes.
Great. And then the other question I have is, have we seen this before? Has Pacifica been a basic aid district before, or is this the first year?
No, this is the first year, and I was very surprised because they only told us like 2 weeks ago before we could, start preparing the report. So I was really surprised when the county notified us.
Yeah, interesting. I too was surprised when I saw the email from superintendent. And then the other question I have is, when do you get the projections for property taxes? Because now it's on a totally different schedule.
We just got them 2 weeks ago.
Oh, okay. 2 weeks
so
ago.
The last estimate we received in August of 2021 did not have this this calculation, and then we received an updated on November 15th.
Great. And then one other question: does this impact any specific restricted or categorical funds that the district had been planning for? No.
No, it does not impact any of the restricted or categorical funds.
Okay, great. And then
Can I just maybe answer that one too? That one of the differences when you are community funded is that you get X amount of money, and it is depending. It doesn't matter whether you have 3,000 students or 3,200 students, right? So in that case,
the fewer students you have, the more per student that you have. And then, however, when you're in the LCFF, per pupil funding matters a lot. You want to bring every student possibly in. And that's going to be one factor, but the good news is probably in a good 5 years, we'll be over that line consistently. What it does kind of signal is the next couple years are going to be rocky and uncertain. And we know in Pacifica, we're used to uncertain, but this is probably more uncertain. It's going to be a tough couple of years.
Yeah, and just to that point, you know, I agree, Josie, on your comment of looking at the fund balance, really kind of re-looking at the budget from a structural standpoint. And I know the superintendent has a community committee plan to look at that, but I would agree that that's a really important activity to do in the next couple of years. My last question is a very specific question, but your comment on deferred maintenance was very interesting. Deferred maintenance to me means kind of unexpected costs that would come up in the district. Do we have an adequate fund for routine maintenance and basically preventative action? So, you know, we're looking at our facilities and whatever we need and conducting that kind of repair?
So that's a very good question. There is a state mandate, what's called restricted routine maintenance account, and it's in the restricted side of the budget. And it's mandatory that the district put 3% of funds into that account every year. And that is just over $1 million. And that really, I'll try to answer your question. It's not adequate because it funds the current maintenance department. So it funds the activities of the maintenance department and fixing small things. It doesn't cover deferred maintenance. Like, they do have routine maintenance where they change filters and they have routine things they do and work orders, but it doesn't cover deferred maintenance for when the roofs need to be replaced. We have what's called a FIT program, where it's a facility inspection tool, which you'll see when Will presents the SARCs. You'll see the condition of our sites. So every year we're looking at the condition and marking what needs to be done. But we don't have funds to cover painting and plumbing. I think you'll see a large plumbing expenditure coming up at Cabrillo School. We don't have enough in the deferred maintenance account. Deferred maintenance in our terms is really the roofs, the plumbing, the carpet, the paint, all of those things that are not day-to-day expenditures, but like annual things that you plan for. There is not sufficient funding for that. Does that answer your question?
Absolutely. Thank you. Great explanation. And then the last comment that I wanted to make is I thought this was very well organized and put together, and the level of detail was extremely helpful for me. And I usually ask a lot of questions, but your presentation prevented me from asking.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate that. Thank you.
Well, I emailed you earlier because I was like, Josie, is that a 14% reserve we have? Because my eyes could not believe it. And, you know, getting information like that, you know, being on the board for 7 years and always like just barely making the 3% or the 4 or 5%. So it's kind of like a relief for right now that we're able to have the 14%. The one question I have, and this might be for you or Heather, is how do we increase enrollment? I mean, because have we ever lost 300 students before? You know,
I think that's a great question, and we can talk about it in the future. This year, we don't want to increase enrollment, right? We want to keep it relatively small. I think 3,000 is kind of a perfect number for us, and right now I noticed today we were at 2,835. So it is creeping back up just slightly. So in these kind of uncomfortable flip-floppy years is not the time that we say to all of our neighbors, come on in. So, you know, we're going to have to strategically work with some experts, I guess, in terms of like, how do you get through this flip-flop piece? I was just talking to the superintendent, Nancy McGee, and she said, she's really seen districts struggle in the flip-flop, like, and is going to be working on some legislative relief on that piece, because why should districts struggle in that way for a couple of years? She's seen districts in San Mateo County. Ravenswood would be one of them. But she's seen them struggle and is going to help us seek some legislative relief on that end. So I think we need to really kind of step back and think about, okay, what do we think this is? And so the great news is exactly as you described. We're at 14% reserve. Prior to the pandemic, if we all remember that big meeting at Sunset Ridge, is we were not able to offer a positive certification. Like that was really tough, and we thought about what it meant for our bond credit rating. We thought about what that meant for workforce housing future loans. So the good news is that this is a great one. It's really hard and we're going to be as honest and transparent as possible, is that it's not going to be this good in the next couple of years. And so as we have, I'm really excited about the stakeholder working group, because we are going to have to be perfectly clear on, if we don't use our money to get us what we need, we're missing the opportunity. But there's not enough money to do all of these things. And so that's how, as a community, we're going to have to think about that. And it's also just, there's a little bit of a toe on the scale with all of that COVID money sitting in there. Is like, we haven't spent it all, but those needs are great. And, we want to continue with the additional mental health support and the additional staff to do that. And we're going to need to do that.
My other question kind of goes into the stakeholder working group, and if they're going to review the parcel taxes as well, because I see that our parcel tax went up too. So does this mean for the next year it's going to go up again and up again, so we'll be getting more funds there?
I can answer that. Did I have a parcel tax slide in here?
I thought I saw
Somehow we skipped this. I'm very sorry. Somehow we didn't go over this slide. So I can just answer your question now, if you don't mind.
You want me to put it up there?
Yeah, somehow I missed this. It's right before the questions. Oh yeah, there it is. Other district considerations. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, I was wondering,
Yeah.
it wasn't.
Yeah, okay. So with the parcel tax also, we have a larger beginning fund balance this year. And you can see it now, it's on the screen, it's $262,000, and that's because last year the students were not able to go to outdoor education. And outdoor education is about $150,000 a year, depending on how many fifth graders you have. So now the current projection, we start with the $262,000. And the parcel tax has not increased. It's been in about the $1.3, $1.2 million range. It really has, it's not like there's an escalator on that, because we have a flat amount that we're asking. And based on senior exemptions and disability exemptions, it just hasn't fluctuated that much. So you have, beginning this year, $1.5 million. And then we still have the same categories that the board authorized expenditures in. And we pay for 6 teachers in parcel tax. And it's $713,000. And then teacher support for new teachers. We've had a lot of new teachers, and the county provides that support. It's almost $100,000. We do support 2.5 counselors. This year we were fortunate to increase our counseling staff with COVID funds, but the parcel tax has been committed to the 2.5 FTE for counselors. And then library media technicians, the parcel tax covers 4 hours per school site. I know some of the schools add some time, but it's 4 hours. And then outdoor education for both 5th and 6th grades is $275,000, and I've heard very good things this year about the kids coming back from outdoor education. That's really exciting. And then school gardens is a really small amount to support science, is just over $4,000. So we're projecting $1.5 million, and you can see there really isn't extra money in the parcel tax, because we used the funds to cover the outdoor education for the 6th graders this year. So ongoing, it's kind of a break-even program. Some years we don't hire a position, or we have a vacancy and there's some extra funds. But over the years, there really hasn't been a large surplus in this account. So thanks for bringing that up. I'm sorry that we somehow missed that slide.
Well, that was my question, is the more money in there. And then my part B to that is, the stakeholder working group, will they be reviewing the parcel tax funds and expenditures and?
I think we will talk in general about additional funding, so we'll probably talk about PEF fundraising, we'll probably talk about the parcel tax, maybe talk a little bit about the bond, and one of the possible outcomes would be future revenue increases or future efforts, either in a bond or a parcel tax. I know that there's been interest or conversation about and parcel taxes perhaps for compensation. That seems to be a trend in the Bay Area. So.
I think that was all my questions.
Good questions, thank you.
And I just have one, and maybe I missed it at the beginning, but what causes or triggers the flip between community funding and LCSF?
So the LCFF formula is based on your student attendance, and then the state gives you a dollar amount per grade level for each student, and then there's an additional funding from the state for class size, and there's additional funds for students of need in English learners, foster youth, and this low socioeconomically disadvantaged. So that's the formula, and you have to, the state actually has a calculator and based on that formula. And that's the amount of funds that the state funds for the school district. But when your property taxes exceed that formula, then you get the difference, and that's when you're called basic aid or community funded. And so this year, for the first time, the property taxes are $1.4 million higher than what that formula calculates to.
Awesome. Well, okay, great, thank you. Thanks for clarity on that.
Okay. All right, do I have a motion to approve the certification for the first interim report for 2021-2022?
I have one quick clarifying question. So on COLA, basic aid districts, is COLA somewhat irrelevant because that's only for LCFF?
Yeah, they still do the calculator, and then when because there's still an amount
because it's still what we compare against.
Yeah, and there's still an amount in there for the old categorical that the basic aid districts still receive, and there's still an amount in there for what's called EPA, the Education Protection Account. So they still do the calculation, but then they don't receive the additional state funds. It's all property taxes. And I think they still have to account for supplemental students, right, Will, in the LCAP?
Yeah.
You still have to serve the students.
The other thing I think, just in transparency, that we're a little bit nervous about is, so all students receive free lunch. They don't need to fill out a free and reduced lunch application. However, it's really important to us that we account for all of those students because our supplemental funding is based on that. And we are very close to less than 20%. So once we get less than 20%, we no longer receive those funds. That's about $1 million for us. And so we will be communicating as much as possible with both schools and families. Please, 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 if your circumstances have changed or you fall in this, even though everyone has access to this, it's just really important that we can account for that. And I think that would very easily slip out, but we're also very close to losing that.
Yeah, presently, right now, we are below, but it's not at the time when they make the decision, but we are below 20% right now. I mean, it's just, we gotta get everyone to fill out this application.
Yeah. When we have that communication, can we make sure that parents know that this is actually really important to our funding?
Yeah.
Because I think often when parents see it, they just see, oh, it's another document I have to fill out for the districts. They don't really see how there's a connection.
Okay.
But if we make that clear, I think parents will be more responsive.
And I think if we can do that kind of as a throughout the district, right? Mm-hmm. So that the superintendent says it, the principals say it, the teachers say it, the parents say it, I think that's going to be important. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I'll make a motion then to approve the certification of first interim report for 2021-22.
Okay, do I have a second?
I will second it.
Okay, all in favor?
Motion passes 4-0. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Josie.
Thank you.
Item B, single plan for student achievement. Will Lucy?
All right, I'm gonna take a little bit of time here trying to get this up. Could you help in getting all of these principles as panelists?
Yes, okay.
And the one thing is that also, could we turn up the volume on that TV maybe to see, so all of our presenters are gonna be virtual, so
You have to change the speaker.
we think we have it?
Well, I'm on the Bluetooth now, so we can try.
Oh, okay, perfect, perfect,
Yeah.
thank you.
All right, okay. Thank you for your patience here. So, what we put in front of you is a recommendation for approval of the school plans for student achievement for Cabrillo, Ingram B. Lacey, Ocean Shore, Ortega, Sunset Ridge, and Valamar. You received or it was on the packet that you received the SIPSs for each of those schools. And when I say SIPSs, I'm referring to the school plan for student achievement. The purpose of the SIPSs is to ensure the high level of student achievement, meet funding requirements, and establish a site plan that is aligned with district goals and priorities while ensuring continuous growth through the implementation of strategic actions, monitoring and adjusting as the Ed Code Section 64001 states. The important part there is that it is that these plans are in concert with the local control accountability plan, number one, and they meet the individual needs of the students at those particular schools based off data that's received. So I'm going to turn it over to each of the principals, and they're going to share the data first from their just the general data from their sites, their site data, and then also their highlights of their plans, meaning the actions, metrics, and goals within those plans. So first up we have is let me get her slide up here. Is Annie from Cabrillo.
Can you hear me? Okay, terrific. Thank you. Hi, everybody. Good evening. So when we were creating our school-wide goals for Cabrillo, we used the following data. I'm not going to read the slide. I just have a little summary. For our first reading goal, we used our iReady diagnostic data, which showed that 57% of our students are reading one or more grade levels below their current grade. Of the 6 language arts domains assessed, Cabrillo's greatest area of need is in comprehension of informational text and in vocabulary development. For our second goal, our math goal, we use the iReady math diagnostic. This data showed us that we are struggling in all 4 areas of math, all 4 math domains, and over 3/4 of our students are 1 or more grade levels behind their current grade. Goal 3, for our school climate and safety goal, we looked at discipline data. This past year was traumatic for our students, and many returned from the year of distance learning needing extra support in many, many ways. The first 2 goals show that our students returned needing academic support, but even more importantly, support in the area of social emotional learning. Many students are having to relearn appropriate interactions with peers, as well as expected behaviors at school. Unfortunately, we did have 7 suspensions by mid-November, several in-school suspensions, and many more referrals than I've had in the same time period in any pre-pandemic school, or in any pre-pandemic area in any school in my 25 years of being in education. I know that other schools and districts are reporting similar struggles, but we're working very hard, and we're proud of the activities and the action steps that will help us make great growth in this year. Focusing on English language arts, we offer time with a reading intervention specialist. You know what, Will, I never said you could go to the other, yeah, thanks, sorry about that. We offer time with a reading intervention specialist for struggling readers in grades 1 through 4. We're offering the use of an online support called Paper for the upper graders in English. We're using iReady's personalized learning licenses, supporting our most at-risk students in both English and math. We will start an after-school intervention academic center for math help for any of our students in 5th through 8th grade. That starts in January. And focusing on our social emotional learning, school climate and safety, we are continuing and expanding the use of the Caring School Communities curriculum to address the social and emotional needs of our students. Lastly, finally, we're so grateful to have a full-time counselor at Cabrillo to create and present lessons that reinforce a positive school climate. Thank you.
And from Ingrid B. Lacey. Hi, Dan.
So I'd like to say that we're using the iReady diagnostic results, and we're very pleased to be using the iReady platform over the standard CASP data, because we're able to see a change over time in the same school year rather than waiting from year to year. So in our first two goals for the SIPSA, the first one's the language arts. We use the iReady data from our diagnostic early in the year, finding that 35% of our students are scoring 2 or more grade levels below grade level in the area of understanding and application of vocabulary, which is about 140 students total. In math, we have 23% of our students are scoring 2 or more grade levels below grade level on the iReady diagnostic in the area of numbers and operations. So that's about 100 students overall that are scoring 2 or more grade levels below. And then our third goal is around school climate and social emotional support for students. And we took the Panorama 2021 survey, which indicated that 45% of our students were not feeling engaged with school because of the distance learning model. 55% of the students definitely said that they needed some assistance with their peer relations because they had not been around other children their age. And then the families also indicated that their student needs were not being met, and that would be the academic and social needs. In addition to that, we are looking at reducing the overall number of documented student incidents by 20% using our current year data. And that if we extrapolate that data from the information that we currently have to the end of the school year, we would have 87 documented incidents. And that would be anywhere between, lunch detention, after school detention, in-house suspension, which is what we've seen thus far. And what we'd like to do is reduce that by 20% over the current school year. You can go ahead and move on, Will. So we want to be able to support the students in English or reading and math. We're targeting those students that were English learners or in socioeconomically disadvantaged students in the areas of reading and math for the iReady personalized learning. These are students that have, over time, we have been our target students when we're using CASPA data. And so we want to continue to further support those students with acquisition of skills and for vocabulary, as well as numbers and operations. We want to seek out and provide additional professional development for the use of vocabulary across all grade levels and content areas. And that's something our staff is really looking for support to be able to support the students with the acquisition of vocabulary. We are providing funding for before and after school homework and academic centers to support the students with homework completion, projects, classwork, and the centers are staffed by our site teaching staff. And we've been doing this for many, many years. We found it to be very successful. We're also using paper like Annie is over at Cabrillo for our 7th and 8th grade students. And we're getting good use of that online source from our students. And we want to continue working with Tanae Weller and High Expectations to provide family success nights around supporting their students in learning and achievement. And our staff is also asking for facilitated professional development opportunities to improve their knowledge and understanding of implicit bias and restorative practices. We initially had trainings with Circle Up Education probably 5, maybe 6 years ago, and we're looking to have to work with them again in the future this year to bring back some refreshers for our staff because of staff turnover, and just it would be a great idea to just refresh our knowledge. And then finally, we're going to be continuing to use the Caring School Communities curriculum through our advisory program. Thank you.
Jean, the Ocean Shore.
Hello, can everybody hear me? Yay, excellent. So at the risk of seeming like I'm copying Dan and everything, he is a mentor and I do look up to him. But unsurprisingly, we are finding the same kind of diagnostic results through iReady that the other schools are. 54% of our students are one or more grade levels below their current grade level in the area of understanding and application of vocabulary. This percentage represents approximately 193 students. Math as well, 66% of our students are one or more grade levels below their current grade level in the area of numbers and operations. This is about 223 students. And then Panorama, we looked at the Panorama survey from fall of 2020 to look at relationships between staff and students and students and students. And our numbers are pretty good. 48% of 6th through 8th graders felt positively about the relationship with staff and their peers, and 51% of 3rd to 5th graders did. Next slide. So like, Annie and Dan have already said, we're focusing on the use of iReady personalized learning support for our students, especially our English language learners and our students who are socioeconomically disadvantaged in areas of both reading and math. We're also going to provide small group support led by paraprofessionals for students identified again for these 2 targeted groups in grades 1 through 5. We also have some small group support for students in our split classes, our 4-5 and our 7-8 math classes. We are also using paper as IBL is for our 7th and 8th grade students. And that's something that we haven't been utilizing as much as I would like. And so I'm pushing a little bit with our 7th and 8th grade teachers to push that out a little bit to parents and students so we can get better use out of that. As far as social and emotional goals, we're going to be continuing events such as Indigenous Peoples Day, Diversity Day, Building Awareness Day, and programs that teach acceptance and understanding, overall health, well-being, and mindful living. We are going to develop an office referral system to track data. Everyone knows Ocean Shore is kind of our hippy-dippy school, as some have referred to it, and we don't have as clear data as I would like. In regards to office referrals, so I'm setting that up now, and we are going to track referrals. I'm going to collect data from December and January, and then hopefully reduce that those referrals by 20% come May and June. And then we're going to continue using our Caring School Communities curriculum. And our new school counselor, who has been amazing. Gitama Sharma is truly a gift. And she has already been in multiple classrooms facilitating circles. She's been conducting restorative meetings between students that are having conflicts. I just feel blessed to have her on my staff. And I know that she's going to continue to help us help the kids resolve conflicts and learn how, relearn how to get along as a group. That's it for me.
All right, Patrick is up next, Ortega.
Hi, can you all hear me? Awesome, and I apologize for any imminent interruption. My kids are literally about to walk through the door, so I'm gonna get through this as quick as I can. Much like my colleagues, I did use a lot of iReady data to develop our goals. For our ELA goal, we used the iReady ELA diagnostic overall reading placement data, which said that 65% of our students are identifying as one grade level below or more for overall reading placement. For our math goal, we again used iReady data. 80% of our students are identifying as one grade level below or more for overall math placement on that fall assessment. For our SEL goal, we focused on our Panorama Family Survey Spring 2021 data. Within that, 19% of respondents said they were extremely concerned about students' social emotional well-being, which is a very concerning percentage that we want to reduce, obviously. And when asked how helpful has communication been from your student's school, 29% responded quite helpful, but that's still a number we want to boost more. Next slide, please. Just to focus on a few of the points in the highlights here, I definitely wanted to point out our targeted book purchase. Our library media technician, Julia Hall, works really hard to find high interest books that will aid language development for English language learners, and also leveled books for our developing readers. Our library is just an incredible asset for our students. We want to survey families to gauge where they need support with Bridges at Home and develop a math night around that feedback where families can leave with both strategies and materials to support Bridges at Home. And then our amazing calendar. Hello. Hi. Hi. Oh. Sorry. And then our amazing counselor who's helping implement caring school communities with an emphasis on classroom circles and cross-age buddies. It's going a long way to restoring Ortega's sense of community and our students' comfort as we continue this transition back to school. That's all for me. Thank you.
And now we have Sunset Ridge and Ellie.
Hi, everyone. It's nice to see everybody. So I'm just going to go over some of the data that we used. Like the other schools I've already mentioned, we used iReady assessments, and we had about 97.4% of our students participate in the iReady assessment for grades 1st through 5th grade. And we see that we have about 27.4% of our students meeting or exceeding grade level expectations in reading. And we have about 12.4% of our students meeting or exceeding grade level expectations in math. Using the instructional leadership team, the school site council, and our family engagement team that we've developed, and also using staff meetings and getting teacher input, we've developed a goal around a school-wide goal to address reading. Many of the teachers have shared that the Bridges math requires a lot of reading, and so we want to make sure that the kids have the skills that they need to be able to do the math that's involved, or the reading that's involved to complete the math. So we're excited about that. We have about 45% of our students in 1st through 5th graders that will be participating in the iReady personalized lessons. And we have about 30% of our students that are identified as chronically absent. And that's looking at students that are absent for any reason, right? They might be excused for COVID-related reasons, or for just being not well, or for actually missing school for unexcused reasons. But we want to look at that and support kids with getting to school when they are well enough to be at school. And that's a huge number, right? That's a bigger number than we've seen in the past. And then we have about 35% of our schools, or of our students, reporting that they feel connected to their peers, and that's from the Panorama survey that was done in the spring. I'm sorry? All right, so I'll go on to our highlights. So what we did, knowing that reading was an area we wanted to focus on, we were able to reorganize our classes in first in kindergarten, and we are using a certified teacher or certificated teacher to provide reading intervention for grades 1st, 2nd, and 3rd grade. And that is going really well. Ms. Skinner agreed to do this, and it's really supported our 1st, 2nd, and 3rd grade kids with getting some individualized reading. We have 2 classified staff members that are providing level literacy intervention for our 4th and 5th graders. And we are, we've held 2 rounds of conferences, so parents are aware. We talked about how to share information with families, and we did that right before break. And we are reaching out and getting kids set up on the iReady lessons right now. We are also excited that we've done 2 parent ed nights around helping parents help their kids with comprehension. We're looking at reading nonfiction and fiction books. And we did a family day where all the kids made comprehension bags, and it has ideas and strategies to do before reading and after reading. And then inside the bag, there's questions the kids can pull out, and families can pull out and ask the kids about what they read, questions about what they read, to get kids excited about reading and bring the families into supporting their kids with comprehension. We are continuing to use our biweekly screen team to identify kids that need either academic support, social emotional counseling, and that's really helping. And teachers are aware of the process and invited to attend meetings, and families are invited to attend meetings. And we are lucky to have counselors at our school that are doing individual counseling, small group social skills counseling, and Mr. T is doing a good job going to classrooms and doing school-wide presentations on how to be a good friend, how to support and not bully others, how to stay engaged in their learning. And those are going over really well. And we have our family engagement team, and we've met with Weller a couple times, and she will be coming to a staff meeting to do some more training with our staff. We've done some professional development around family engagement, restorative practices, iReady, and caring school communities. And so, and we're looking forward to doing some home visits. We did quite a few home visits last year, and we'd like to continue that and work with families to get their kids at school when it's safe to do so. And that's all we have at Sunset Ridge. Thank you, Will.
Palomar and Monica.
Hi, everyone. So I apologize, some of this might seem a bit repetitive because all of us are using similar data to support our students and to make decisions about goals and actions. So Valimar also used iReady data, the fall diagnostic. We had 41% at or above grade level for reading, and for math, we had 25% at or above grade level. So we're hoping to increase that by 10% for each subject area. And then our third goal was on our school climate. I took a look at data zone attendance data and our panorama survey from last year. And currently we have 63% of our students having satisfactory attendance, which is a 96% attendance rate. That's what satisfactory means. And then based on our panorama survey, 3rd through 5th grade, 37% feel connected to their teachers, and 33% felt connected to their peers. This was last year, so we're hoping to increase this with in-person school. In 6th through 8th grade, 31% felt connected to their teachers and 20% felt connected to their peers. So we're hoping to work on that this year. And, obviously now that we're back in person, it's a whole different feeling. Will, highlights, please. So thankfully, the iReady program has some personalized instruction for students. So we're getting that going for target students that we've selected. And the teachers helped us select those students. We are continuing our after-school academic centers. Even though we did not receive the county grant, our PTO is supporting us with this so that we can offer some support for our 4th through 8th graders after school. And this is run by our site teaching staff. We also have, to support early literacy, our 1st through 3rd grade are receiving reading intervention with a classified paraprofessional who is trained in leveled literacy intervention. So that's going well in small groups. And we use the paper online tutoring support that the district has provided this year for our 7th and 8th grade students. It's really helpful. Will sends us an update every few weeks so we can see how many of our students are accessing and if we need to do more outreach to get more kids involved. Like all the schools, we're continuing to implement the Caring School Communities curriculum school-wide. Valamar specifically is focusing on community circles and targeting lessons based on whatever need we see happening in the classroom or on the schoolyard. Our wonderful full-time counselor is just, he's wonderful. He's working very closely with the teachers to not only provide lessons within the classroom, but he's guiding them through the Caring School Community curriculum, which is helpful for all of us, in addition to his individual and small group counseling. And then we're also working with Tanae with the High Expectations Family Engagement. Valamar continues to want to support our 1st grade students by doing a family literacy night. We just have to get creative about how to do that this year in a COVID safe way. And that's it for me. Thank you.
Okay, so you've heard all of the presentations there. I wanted to give you an opportunity. I should have said this at the beginning, that we were going to wait till the end for any kind of questions, but the principals are going to stay on. So if you have any questions like directly for them, I think they'd be more than willing to answer any questions about that, or I can answer any general questions about the SIPSAs and the SIPSA process.
Will, might you take the presentation down
Sure.
so that we can see,
Sure.
we can maybe see the gallery of their faces?
Yes. There you go.
Have any questions for the principals?
Sure, I have a couple of comments and questions. So first, one, I just wanted to say thank you for the presentations. I'm really encouraged by the thoughtful planning that went into both the analysis of the needs and then the highlights of areas. I thought that was great. And in fact, one of the things that I thought was really great about putting it all together was how we can look across campuses. And one thing that we see is the academic needs are actually very similar across many of the campuses. But sometimes some of the actions are unique to one campus or another. And I think some of that ability to idea share is a really great opportunity. I just highlighted a couple of actions or highlights from various campuses that I think were very interesting, and I'd love to see if they can be expanded across the board. One was before school tutoring. Many schools had after, but before was only in a couple. Push-in support for small groups in math. Teacher professional development around certain areas like bridges or the vocabulary development. Math night for families, certificated teacher for reading intervention. You know, those are some of the unique elements that I saw in some, and I thought it was great because we can now see how they can be applied across the board, or if they can be applied. So that's my second comment. My third is just, you know, I'm very passionate about math, and so the math scores across the board in this district are very concerning to me. I consider it one area that I feel personally very, I care very deeply about it. And so I would just, again, I would love to see how much more we can think creatively about supporting our students in math. One of the things that I found in general is the one variable that makes a difference in math is time. So some students just need more time to understand the concepts. And so how can we be creative, not just outside of school hours, but within the school hours, to provide more direct math instruction and time for students to really get back to grade level.
I just had some comments mostly that I appreciate all the work that the principals and the teachers and the staff are doing, because after reviewing the numbers, you know, it's concerning with the math and the reading. But I am in total support. I think it was IDL before and after school tutoring or support. Ballymar had it, and one other school, Cabrillo, had it. And that's something that I really think would help the kids, is the after school and before school. And I wanted to make a comment on Ortega. Ortega and Ocean Shore were my schools for review. And I noticed in some of the SIPSAs that there's aides that are going to be helping in some of these areas, and I'm just wondering if we're fully staffed and ready to go in and help the students with the aides who are in the SIPSAs. That was one of my concerns. And then I just love how Ortega is using the librarian to help in the language, because I don't know if you guys know, but if you read to your kids 3-4 times a day, you know, they have 1 million more words of vocabulary. So I've heard the word vocabulary a few times in the presentations. So I just really like that Ortega is using the librarian to help with that too. The only thing, and this is a general across the board, is, you know, we have some students who are really struggling, like the African American, American Indian, lower income, homeless, special ed. And for some, we don't even keep data for them. And I've repeated this several times. So how are we supposed to help, you know, the African American, American Indian, if we're not keeping data on them, or if we're not sharing it with the board members in public like we're supposed to? And so, you know, it's really one of my passions, and, you know, I may, as a community member, as just a citizen, I may write to, you know, the state to just say, this is not right. How are we supposed to help our kids if we're not keeping the stats on them and not making them known? So that's just one of my things about the SIPSA. So I would like to know, how are we going to help them right now? Because as of now, there's, in some of the reports, it says there's not enough students to report that on. So how are we going to know about those students? That's a question I have for anybody. Maybe
So
Heather.
there are kind of two responses to that. One is that, and Linda actually pointed out, is how old the data is, right? If you look at the CASP data, it's just old data that's not really that current in general. So that's why each of our principals referred back to the iReady data. You know, as the year goes along, we'll also be able to look at Fontes and Pinnell reading scores, other pieces of data, but just out of the gate is that we don't have kind of our annual summative assessment. Well, the other piece is that we keep track of how our students are doing, and it's one of the reasons why we went to a formative assessment like iReady that could give us that data. And I think Dan Little said, you know, the good point is that it's not just once a year, it's over time, and that we're going to be able to see progress on that. So just because it's not something that gets reported in public doesn't mean that we're not looking at it. The reason that it doesn't get reported in public, just like with some of those suspensions, is that in places where there are very, very small numbers, it's a privacy issue. And so, but it doesn't mean that we don't care or that we're not watching. We haven't quite found the right way to share that data with you, but we certainly can't do it in a public setting. just because when you do have a small number of kids, you don't want everybody to be able to say that, right? And so if anybody has suggestions for how we can do that or how we can do that routinely, but it doesn't mean, I mean, the schools are looking at students and they're looking at their success. And one of the things that I heard as a recurrent theme was the use of other team members that we haven't always had available. So looking at a school counselor, I think just like Ortega used their school librarian, they also called out the use of the school counselor to kind of bring back that community spirit. So I do know that the schools are looking at supporting all students.
Yeah, if I could just add to that, I know that during the SIPS planning period, I was working directly with a lot of the principals and getting these together, and they were working with their school site councils, and I know that conversation was happening. Even though they can't be like identified, there was this idea of how are we supporting these populations? How is iReady benefiting, or the data we're pulling from iReady benefiting these populations in moving forward? So I know the conversation's happening. iReady individualizes it, so they're saying, okay, these students are students that are struggling. They may fall into these groups. So so there is an attention that is being given to them, be given to that. And then the other part about the CAS status, it's not even dashboard qualifying, meaning that the data we just received from the last CAS tests, which was incomplete, and there was a bit of the have and have-nots in who actually took the test, that it just wasn't valid data that would support especially those populations.
Yeah, I was just concerned because the children in our district with the most challenges are some of the ones we're not reporting out on. And so there's a correlation there. And so
1,000%, and I will also say that, prior to the pandemic 3 years ago, we do really well with kids that traditionally do very well in school. And I think, as with what happened in the rest of the country, is that the kids' success during distance learning and during the pandemic was unevenly distributed. Some kids did really well, and some kids, it wasn't a great match at all. And when you see the long list of things that Sunset Ridge is doing, their kids were very, very much impacted by distance learning in by the pandemic, by not having access to school. So across the board, what I could say that the biggest intervention that we're having is that we have safely returned to school with really a fair amount of stability. Yes, we get a couple of cases every once in a while that keep a few kids out, but with the modified quarantine, kids are in school almost every day. We are working with a company called Everyday Labs that's going to help us start communicating with parents around attendance. So obviously, when kids are sick, we don't want them to come to school. But every other day, we want them at school, because that's, again, the second part of, now that we're back at school, we need kids to be in school consistently. Like, that's going to be a really important piece of that. And I think that that we are committed to helping all kids, and it's a great opportunity. Like, we do have resources, and that's why we want to make sure that we use those resources to help kids learn to the greatest degree. And the kids that were most disproportionately impacted, we want to make sure that that money goes to supporting those kids.
Yes. So that was just one of my concerns, and it's been a concern of mine in the past as well. But yeah, everything that they're going to do, they have quite a year for them, and I support them.
All right. I also just want to say thank you to everybody that pulled together all the iReady data. And it was hard for teachers to get that given, but it's really valuable for all of us, and I think will help the district greatly. So thank you so much for doing that. I did send Ms. Labeo a few questions. I probably won't ask them all, but there was note, well, two things. One is I noticed there was a lot of below average scores for your third graders. Now, again, my personal note on this is that before COVID, there weren't nearly as many younger kids using computers. And I personally had always felt like the kids in third grade just didn't know how to use the tool to take the test. So I am curious, I guess, to see how results are after this going forward and seeing, I just want to make sure that when the time the kids come to third grade, by the time they're there, they're actually prepared to take the test and not just figuring it out a week and a half before the test happens. Let's see. To your point, Vern, it was noted that there were a lot of actually Hispanic children that were falling behind in the core subjects. Maybe Ms. Labeo could just kind of talk to us a little bit about the interventions that are happening at Valamar in that area.
Yeah. So I shared in some of the highlights that we are using the iReady personalized instructions. So the teachers have looked at their iReady data and their FMP scores, as well as their math scores, and they've selected target students, and that includes students from different subgroups. So they're using that personalized online instruction for them. And then in grades 1st through 3rd grade, we have the reading intervention to focus on early literacy skills and hopefully boost the skills before they get to 3rd grade. Like you mentioned, in 3rd grade, there were the scores were a bit lower. So we're hoping to see an improvement there. And then in some of the other grades, we've got the paper online tutoring, and we also use Pacifica School of Volunteers for some one-on-one support in small groups. And then we have the after-school academic centers too to support our 4th through 8th graders. So that's some of the stuff we do. A lot of the other interventions that we do are classroom-based and are within the classroom with their teachers. So the teachers work with students one-on-one and in small groups in the classroom as well.
The question was just about social emotional learning. I know that's been a hard thing for a lot of the students. And you had mentioned the Caring Schools Community Social Emotional Learning Curriculum. I guess kind of, if you could talk to it a little bit, just what we're doing for the kids and to just help them in that area.
Was that question for Valamar or all of us? Because we all use that curriculum. Okay, sure. So the curriculum is pretty scripted. So for each grade level, there's a variety of lessons. So the teachers are using those. We had to, we were introduced to Caring School Communities last spring. And, it was during a time where everybody was pretty overwhelmed. So as a school, as a school staff, we met and we tried to pick something that would be manageable for teachers. So we started with community circles. And so we've been sticking with that all along. So in all the grade levels, teachers will find time multiple times a week. In the older grades, I believe it's once a week on Wednesdays, and they will do a circle with their class, and they will focus on a topic that is important that might be happening at recess. So an issue that's happening, they might discuss through that, or they might just use a circle to get to know each other and build relationships. So community circles is a theme that you will see at Valamar. And then the teachers also use those lessons that are targeted for their grade level on different topics. So that could be on, how to address bullying, how to be a bystander, it varies by grade level. So they are doing more of those this year. They're kind of diving into those, and the school counselor is supporting them with that. So he might go in and do a lesson, co-teach a lesson with them, or he might just go in and do a lesson based on something we're seeing on the yard. Like if we're seeing a lot of physical aggression, we might do a lesson to target that. So that's a little bit about Caring School Communities and what we're doing. But I would say, on any given day in Valamar, one thing you will see is the community circles, and we are really working hard to use restorative approaches to handling issues that come up.
And then I actually have 2 more questions for you, Ms. Leo. They're just 2 of the ones I sent. So I had noticed that the PTO is actually giving quite a lot of financial support to the schools, and I had asked you, I know when I was on the PTO, we worked a lot on trying to make sure that staff was being paid by the school district and that PTO stuff was separate. I know I did ask you what support you guys still have from the PTO. I know you mentioned music for K-8, art for K through 8, electives for 7th and 8th grade. Actually, maybe I'm not actually having you give me too much feedback on it, but I guess I wanted my colleagues to know that there is a lot of financial support at that school and maybe one or two others, and that we, as money starts to shift or whatever, we should probably think about how we can make sure it's equitable all the way across the board, making sure all upper grades are getting the support at all schools. But I just wanted to sort of mention it just to put it out there, because there is more money going into the schools. And I know it will be brought up also the community thing, but we should just kind of be mindful, I guess, that that's there. And then, let's see, I guess my last question to you, Ms. Labeo, because I kind of talked over your last question, is finally, what do you feel like are there any areas of need that Valimar needs for additional support that the board should be aware of? So is there things that we've missed, that we don't know about, that Valimar could really use help with?
Well, sure. I'm sure if you ask any of the principals, they'd have a very lengthy answer on that. But just some highlights that I'll share today is, we do appreciate the district's support of our combo classes, because we do have the standard K1 combo and 2-3 combo year after year. And the district has supported us a few years in a row with a 1-hour math combo aid for those classes. And that's been very helpful. So we would love to see that support continue. And if there's ever funding to increase that time so that that adult can come in and support the combo class. The reason why we do that for math is because our Bridges program is so grade specific. So in a combo class, it is challenging to teach 2 separate math curriculums, whereas our balanced literacy program is a workshop model. So you can teach, informational writing to 2 grades and then just have different writing expectations for each grade. So it's a little easier to do whole class. So I can say with confidence that I know Valimar staff appreciates the support, and they would love to see if there's ever more funding to have more support with the combos. I'm sure all principals would agree with me on this, but I know Valimar is always a fan of more prep time for teachers. So I'm sure the board is aware of that. And then also just, I know we've talked a lot about interventions. That's always on our minds as well. The Valimar staff cares deeply about all of our students and seeing them grow academically and grow as citizens. So any support for additional interventions is always appreciated.
Okay, and I didn't really have any questions, but just some comments that I think they're all doing a great job on school culture and the social emotional learning and increasing the school counselors. I think that's vitally important. And IBL had mentioned the healthy living program through the PE departments, things like that. I think that's definitely all needed right now. The math, English, and social studies being behind grade level, it's at a critical level. We're not the only school with the pandemic. I think all the districts or everyone's behind. But when you see that some of them are 2 or 3 years behind, we really need to get on that. And so with everything that was already mentioned here today, the before and after school programs, the teachers assisting, any extra curriculum, we just need to really pile that on right now to bring that up. So it's in a critical level at this point. But the social emotional learning is, I think they're dead on that. And thank you to all the principals for all the work. And
I think kind of the unspoken part is that we finished that whole thing, and I don't think we mentioned the word COVID at all. And we want to be acknowledge that you know, when we started the beginning of school, the start was hard, and getting back into it, considering the Delta variant and how the extra things that requires schools and principals and teachers to do. So, you know, while things are extremely hard, I just want to acknowledge what a great place we are in terms of having kids back to school with great consistency and great stability. That's the best intervention that we can do right now, is just keep kids healthy, keep, you know, staff healthy, keep our doors open, and keep doing this work both on the social emotional and the academics, because they're both important. I think probably most educators didn't realize how hard the not being in school and how hard that social emotional learning part was going to be. I think that's the one that kind of surprised us all, where we think that we've made the right steps, and we're very, very grateful for the work that is happening in our classrooms. And we will get there. Like, I think we just have to keep, you know, talking about it and talking about the right things. More is not necessarily better. More days in the classroom are better. That's kind of like, we have to just kind of keep hitting singles and looking for those kids that need more than everyone needs, right? So those kids that need more additional help, and I feel pretty confident in our assessments, either through iReady or our curriculum-based assessments, that we will find those kids.
Well, I have one more question. It wasn't after that. We were talking because the chronic absenteeism's kind of, you know, across the board. And I'm just wondering if there's anything that the district is doing to help assist the sites on the chronic absenteeism.
So it took us a while to get it up and going, but we have a contract with Everyday Labs that's going to help us with the communication around that. Why it's particularly challenging during these periods of time is because we are crystal clear is that if you have symptoms, we don't want you to come to school, right? Until we've got proof of a negative test or those symptoms have gone away. So we have to be absolutely vigilant on that, and we'll be working with families in terms of being crystal clear on the communication. You know, the Omicron variant is just one more opportunity to get that communication out there. So that's kind of the hard part to that. But we had a chronic absentee problem before the pandemic, right? Like that was one of our, I know it affects our student achievement. I know it affects our students' engagement with school. And we knew it was a problem back then. And then here we are. It just gets a little bit muddier because when there's been a positive case in class, a parent may, even though they don't need to, may keep their child out just to be protective. And that's where we're going to have to help around the communication and how important school is. I think sometimes, you know, chronic absenteeism is missing 10% of school, and I think parents don't realize how quickly those days creep up. You can get to those 18 days. That's, you know, that's a whole month worth of school. So that's our effort, is working with Everyday Labs. And in that, they're going to help us with our school attendance review. And so some of the truancy letters, they're doing professional development. We'll do some professional development hopefully in December with principals and secretaries around, you know, how we work with families that are absent. That's really important. I mean, that if we look at a district-wide intervention, it's important for a couple reasons. Number one, being in school is the most important intervention that we can provide. Kind of the second piece is, if we go back to the first presentation when we talked about how important that school attendance is going to be when we're an LCFF district. You know, next year when every day counts, we can't have kids missing 18 days worth of school. So kind of it's a student thing and a financial one.
When I first got on board, I actually asked Josie how much we would lose per student, and I believe it was $240 per day per student. So if you're a parent who decides they want to take a 4-day weekend and you have 2 children, or a 4-day vacation, that's $2,000 out the window that the district doesn't get. And that adds up a lot, and really quickly. So I just wanted to mention that it is real money, and it's taken from yourself and the peers, when that happens, so.
Right. Again, it doesn't matter this year, but it certainly does in the funding part of that. You guys asked really good questions. Thank you very much. Anything else?
Anyone else have any comments or questions?
Before we sign off on our principals, well, now that we also have staff members, is that I couldn't be prouder of the work of our staff. And that my voice will crumble, but I really truly could not. And this has been the hardest year when I look at the leaders in this district. There has never been a harder year than what is happening right now. So to write a plan that is simple enough, yet meaningful enough, those plans are going to make a difference for kids. And I think I applaud this group of people for everything that they do to have kids in school every single day. So thank you to our leaders, and thank you to our teachers that are on staff and our classified staff, keeping people healthy and safe. When there's a positive case, we go out, we are able to rapid test kids, and that's a group effort. That's the classified staff that are helping us get those tests out there. And so I could not be prouder of the work that our group is doing, and we just have to remember that being in school is the best part that we can do right now, and we have to just keep that going, no matter how hard it is, and our focus on the students and their social emotional learning at the same time that we're taking care of our staff is going to get us to that next step. So thank you very much, leaders. Your leadership has made a huge difference.
Okay, do I have a motion to approve the single plan for student achievement for Cabrillo, Ingrid B. Lacey, Ocean Shore, Ortega, Sunset Ridge, and Valamar?
I'll make a motion for the single plan for student achievement success.
For all of them? Okay. Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Okay, all in favor?
Motion passes 4-0. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Good night.
Item C, Educator Effectiveness Plan. Well, Lucy.
Okay, another grant. Woo. So tonight is not the night to decide or make a motion to decide. This is more of just an explanation of what this Educators Effectiveness Block Grant is. We had previously in this district a similar one we call the EEBG. This is different. This particular plan is for and intended for professional development of our staff, right? So you have a copy of the grant, the plan that we are required to put together. I do want to tell you that when we were putting together this plan and we were considering all of our needs and our stakeholders and previous stakeholder engagement around this, we wanted to purposely make it as general as we possibly can. And that's just not unique to Pacifica School District. All of my colleagues in other districts were doing the same thing. The reason being is this grant goes till 2025. And so a lot of the things, we don't really know where the needs will be professional development wise specifically until we're closer to those years. So this plan kind of spans professional development across all the areas: social emotional professional development, academic professional development, even our supports out on the yard with Playworks, even though there's some professional development around that's being supported in this. So I don't want to go into the details of it, but if there's any general questions that you saw within there, I'd be willing to answer them with the understanding that we did keep it general enough. So I purposely we weren't making it a specific actions as we would in a local control accountability plan and so on. So do you have any questions? Yes.
So fully appreciate that you're keeping it very general, and so this question may sound like I didn't hear you, but I did. One thing that I noticed when I was a teacher is I got a ton of professional development, and it was all about my classroom management strategies, also my social emotional connection with students, But the one area that I always felt the district that I worked in, which was not Pacifica, did not support me well enough was in how to teach math to my sixth graders and how to teach math to struggling students and what have you. And so I just wanted to make sure that we are providing for very specific content-based instructional support. And we have some new programs, great programs like Bridges and iReady and what have you. And so making sure that that kind of really targeted content support is also provided for teachers, just given all the needs that we just heard about as well.
Yeah, I definitely appreciate that. Under the section 6, there's planned activities around early intervention, universal design, progress monitoring, training for teachers. That, again, in a general sense, will fall under that. One of the things that we obviously, if there was more money in this grant, we might consider, I'm not saying that we would do it, but we might consider, is if we had, people who were experts in those areas to provide that professional development instead of really having to fish outside of the district to find people to come in to provide that expertise in those particular areas. But I really appreciated what you were saying there, because that does fall under that section 6 that we place that in a very general sense.
Yeah, I mean, I'd love to just see a focus on content, specific, like that word content just doesn't show up in any of this. And so I don't know if there's a way to make sure that's being accounted for, because UDL and a lot of those other things are great, but they're general. They're not about how to intervene into my sixth grader doesn't know how to subtract. So how do I help them, get to that level where they're standards-based, but given where they are, what do I do? And that's where the rubber kind of meets the road a lot of the time in achievement.
You bring up a really good point, and I think, we can certainly change the wording in there to say content, but that just goes back to my earlier discussion around SIPSs, is that the most important thing is that kids are in school and they're receiving high-quality instruction from very highly trained staff that feel confident in their ability to meet their needs. And one of the things that does happen when there are additional funds is people say, let's go get that new thing, let's go get that new thing. And then we've got a million new things, and we're not doing the work that we have always had that has our biggest bang for our buck. And so thank you for that. I appreciate that's a really great point, and we will change the words on that. And we also have to remember, we can't keep going after the next new thing. So thank you.
Okay. I just have a comment that my glasses on. The administrators, staff training on diversity, equity, and inclusion. That I was just really happy to see that, because that's something that we're working on, and so it would be helpful if everybody else was following as well.
Okay. Those were discussions, so thank you, Will. We'll go on from there.
Thank you.
So item D, district proposal for LSEA negotiations. Dr. Torres.
Good evening, Board of Trustees, Superintendent Olson, and the Pacifica School District community. Tonight, it's recommended that the Board of Trustees adopt the Pacifica School District's initial contract proposal for negotiations with Laguna Salada Education Association, LSEA, for the 22-23 school year. Some background information: the public notice sunshine provisions of the Educational Employment Relations Act requires that the Board of Trustees to adopt at a public meeting the initial contract proposal from the Pacifica School District following opportunity for public comment. After allowing an opportunity for comment, the board shall take action on the Pacifica School District proposal. Pursuant to Government Code Section 3547, the Pacifica School District hereby sunshines and submits the following initial proposals to the Laguna Salada Educational Association. Article 7, calendar. The district has an interest in developing and agreeing to calendars for multiple years that acknowledge the needs of our families by aligning with the high school district multi-year calendars. Article 9, compensation. The district has an interest in providing fair and equitable total compensation as defined in Section 9.1 for all unit members. incentives for hard-to-fill positions, and an interest in maintaining the district's long-term fiscal solvency. Article 13, standards-based evaluation process. The district has an interest in adding language to incorporate professional standards for non-classroom teaching positions not already addressed, including but not limited to counselors. This would include updating and/or adding relevant evaluation forms to the appendix. Article 15, safety conditions of employment. The district has an interest in negotiating language that would address various safety-related circumstances and that would be comprehensive enough to obviate the need to bargain discrete MOUs when each such event occurs, thereby furthering the continuity of instruction. The district also reserves the right to propose one additional item during the course of negotiations. Again, it is recommended that the Board of Trustees adopt the Pacifica School District initial contract proposal for negotiations with LSEA. Thank you.
Dr. Torres takes a sip of water. I will just distract you all and tell you that the purpose of this is that we're legally required to inform the public on which matters we're going to negotiate so that if the public wanted to be aware, and as LSEA sunshined at the last meeting, we just wanted to make sure that we got ours in there. Do you have any questions?
My only comment is I was really glad to see the statement incentives for hard-to-fill positions on that document. So thank you.
Okay, so do I have a motion to approve the Pacifica School District's initial contract proposal for negotiations with LSEA for 2022-23 school year?
I'll make a motion to approve the district proposal for LSEA negotiations.
Okay, do I have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, all in favor?
Motion passes 4-0. Thank you.
Okay, thank
Do you
you.
need to take a break at
Huh?
Do you need to take a break at
No, it's okay. We're almost there. Item E, Resolution 2021-12-01-A, certifying acknowledgements to the Office of Public School Construction. Josie Peterson.
Thank you, Trustee Rudolph. This is a procedural item because the district is undergoing with our bond funds modernization and construction. We are also working on applications with the state for facilities funding at the state level. And the state has established that there are applications that have been received beyond the bond authority list. So basically the state might not have enough funds for our applications. And so this resolution basically has 5 acknowledgements that the board acknowledges that the funds might be exhausted and that our application could be returned. And those are the types of acknowledgements that are on this resolution that we put before you tonight. It is really a procedural item for the state to continue with our applications.
Any questions? Okay, do I have a motion to approve Resolution 2021-12-01-A, certifying acknowledgements to the Office of Public School Construction?
I'll make a motion
Okay.
to approve Resolution 2021-12-01-A, certifying acknowledgements to the Office of Public School Construction.
Okay, do I have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, all in favor?
Motion passes 4-0. Thank you.
Okay, item F, commitment incentive for certificated substitutes. Dr. Torres.
All right, I have another recommendation. It is recommended that the Board of Trustees approve Pacifica School District to offer a 50-day and 100-day commitment incentive to our certificated substitutes beginning on Thursday, December 2nd, 2021 through June 9, 2022. The 50-day commitment incentive and/or the 100-day commitment incentive would be paid in June 2022. The amount for each commitment incentive would be $1,000 for a 50-day commitment and $2,500 for a 100-day commitment. Rationale: Pacifica School District would like to incentivize more consistency in substitute teachers choosing to work in our school district versus choosing to work in other school districts. Covering our classes with substitute teachers is important to our schools, as there are days when our certificated staff are unable to come to work for various reasons. Consistency in certificated substitutes would create more stability in the day-to-day operations of our schools. The commitment incentives may also attract new certificated substitutes to the Pacifica School District.
Are there any questions regarding the commitment incentive for certificated substitutes?
One just very quick question. Do we have 100 days?
Yes, we have 118 days.
Okay,
Starting
so
tomorrow.
I was like, can anybody be eligible for that?
Okay, do I have a motion to approve the commitment incentive for certificated substitutes?
I would make a motion to approve the commitment incentive for certificated substitutes.
And do we have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, all in favor?
Motion passes 4-0. Thank you.
Thank you. Item 10, board bylaws for policies and administrative regulations.
Mr. Burkfield.
Thank you. Yes, so this is regarding board policy 5132 for dress and grooming. And the board had asked that we take a look at this board policy through the lens of equity to see if we might have some revisions or some points to discuss there about that. And we've brought two revisions, one on the board policy and one on the administrative regulation. And the main changes that we've made, the first one is on the AR, and you can see you have copies of the red line, where we've taken out the piece on number 4 about the see-through tops and bare abdomens being prohibited, because we felt that may single out possibly female students. So looking through that equity lens, we have removed that. And then the other big change, and you'll see this both in the board policy and the administrative regulation, is about gang-related apparel. And this was, in our existing board policy, its own section, its own major section of, gang-related apparel. And when, we look at our community here, thank goodness what we were thinking, and we did check with Pacifica Police on this, is do we have a gang issue in Pacifica? Like, do we need to have such a have this section be so pronounced in our board policy? So we did check with Pacifica Police Department. They advise us to keep some language in our policy around gang-related apparel. While our gang activity is nowhere near at the level of some of our neighboring communities, it does exist, and the recommendation was that it remains to some extent, so that if principals, administrators have a mechanism or a tool to nip it in the bud. And and it was some of the pieces in there about colors and promoting gang affiliation was really what was stressed to us as something to look at with this policy. So those were just two of the changes. I mean, you have the draft changes there in front of you, but we'd like to open this up for discussion.
Okay.
Well, I'll go ahead and start because I brought it up. First of all, thank you for taking out the bare midriff business because it is very much targets female students, and also if you have a teenage daughter at this age, you pretty much can't go and buy any clothes that aren't going to be right at the midriff. And also the physical thing of raising your hand, it's so I'm glad that's gone. Secondly, the gang language. I appreciate that you guys talked with the chief of police, but I guess I don't see any place where people's clothes, or maybe you guys can tell me a study of where people's clothes have actually inhibited their ability to learn in the classroom. I just feel like it's often these words are used like gang and, to target children of color, to be quite honest. And I just don't think it's something we really need in our schools. If we trust our students, if we trust our staff enough not to worry that they're bringing their gang issues to Pacifica, which again, I doubt greatly is happening in Pacifica elementary schools, then I think we should trust them enough to take out this language. Because again, I think we should be doing whatever we can to get our kids to stay in school. And if a kid is in a gang or not, if they bother to walk into the door at school, then we should teach them and educate them and not give them a reason to feel discouraged to come to school. I have a problem with that, and I'd like the board to think about that. Other issue I had, or was concerned a little bit about, was there's some opening, well, two things. There's some opening in here for administrators or teachers or their representatives to come up with their own additional dress code, and that's part of why I've come here today with this, is because we had a few schools that just kind of put out their own dress code, and it unfortunately was in line with ours. And I think we need to be careful that, we don't have a lot of jobs up here, but one of them is setting the policy. And so I want to make sure that the policy that we're passing is actually getting down into the classrooms. And then my second thing on that is that I think that we need to have some sort of log of this. If a student is, if a teacher or a staff member feels so compelled to highlight someone not wearing what they feel is dress code violation, then that should be written down in the office, and we should know what teacher made that observation and what student, and so that us as a board can start to evaluate that and make sure it's being administered in an equitable way. I'm a little concerned about stories I'm hearing about the district, about people taking it upon themselves to be the clothing police. And I just don't think that's the teacher's job. The teachers are there to teach. And the students, if they've made it into the room, we should teach them. And we shouldn't make them feel self-conscious about what they're wearing. So those are my comments on it. So I've gotten a lot of emails. Like I said, I do have a 6th grader, and unfortunately, the teenage years is where they start getting dress coded. And again, what do we want to do? Do we want teenagers to start to feel self-conscious about what they're wearing to school? I just don't think that's our position, our job, and I just think it's something we need to fix. So.
My question is, for the colors and the gang related, I have sons, and I don't think I've heard of, oh, mom, so-and-so was wearing these red, gang colors at school. I haven't heard a whole lot of that since I've been here, and so can somebody who met with the police enlighten me on that a little bit, like the gang?
So we reached out to Captain Clements, and he said almost exactly what John said, is that it is not a pervasive problem here like it is in our neighboring communities, and it's not but there is some presence here. And his advice to us was we can, change our language, modify our language. We could do one of two things. We could A, completely take it out and not have any gang-related things, and then if there is an issue, then going through the process of putting that back in. So that's one avenue to go on that. His advice was lighten up your language so that it's in there, and then have it be so that should you need it. And I think, to address Trustee Grokini's concern about it being evenly applied is just ask our principals, like, please don't use this gang-related language. Let us know if you're having issues, and that from the district perspective, we would consider some kind of dress code issue around gang-related apparel, but just say that it's part of the policy, but not to be using that part of the whole thing. So that's how we could address the piece around the gang language. His recommendation was, you don't do nothing, is have something in there. And then the other piece is recognizing how, if it's inconsistently applied, that's a total equity issue, right? Like it's kind of a natural, I think, would be in a place where we'd be very vulnerable, that kids could be targeted, or almost anything that could be used on that end. So we really wouldn't want people to use that, but we also, based on the advice we got, don't want to do nothing on that. So we just, instead of making it its own section, we just had it added it to the list on that end.
Well, what is an example, for instance, just so I can get a clear picture? If a seventh grader, for instance, wears red shoes and a red hat and a red shirt, is that going to leave interpretation open for, oh, he must be a Crip or a Blood,
right,
a Blood? So there is kind of, the possibility that somebody might assume that or target them. And so there could be some equity issues, rather than somebody's favorite color just being red.
And I don't disagree with you, right? It's not an issue for us. And I will also tell you that we're not that quick. And when you see the 144 board policies that we have to make up, we're not that fast at turning it around. So that's where, in all of this piece, it's, and as Trustee Burkini said, it's not so much the policy, but it's the application of the policy. It's like, how is it that we're looking at this? And I will be honest, until we have time to work with principals and they have the same opportunity to get some of the training around diversity, equity, and inclusion, things don't change. And it's not that anybody's deliberately coming in and saying this, but I think one of the reasons why this has bubbled up is kind of a couple pieces, is that we did update our policy in 2019, in February of 2019, just before the pandemic. And then we had the pandemic, and then kids came back to school, and it was one of those features around not having been to school in person and people being out of practice with how that plays, right? And so the discussions didn't happen for what the changes were. I do think that schools could we could tighten up our language around, they call them dress code policies. Maybe we should only use policies from a district perspective and use practices or other kinds of words at a school site. But the language is, we do set the policy and we set the administrative regulations, how things get played out, and then kind of the boots on the ground piece is what happens at the school site. So I want to make sure that we get the piece where you said that there was, principals could put in additional language. There is...
let's see.
Is it the section on being modified
Yeah.
as appropriate
Right.
to accommodate a student's religious or cultural observance, health condition, or other circumstance?
Yeah, I guess what I'm, if you put sort of other circumstance,
Yeah.
that could be anything. And that's too general, in my opinion. Though, I don't want to limit everyone, but at the same time, I hear we've had a problem. People are going off on their own ways, and it's not right. It's going to put us in a position of liability if we're targeting particular children or, groups. Yeah, I just want to say one more thing, though, about the gang. I just feel if you put gang affiliation it's just gonna give people an excuse to say, I think you're, I won't tell names, but, where there was a student at one of our schools who was wearing a do-rag, and he's African American boy and wearing a do-rag, and it's very much with his culture to wear that. And a teacher came up to him and told him he looked like he was in a gang, and he's just a kid, And so I'm afraid, if you start being emotional about this, but if you put this language in here, it just gives people a place to go and point, and it's not fair to kids. So.
Well, let's hear from the other trustees how they feel about the language around gang. Should we take that out?
Yeah, the only thing that I wanted to really highlight is, I think, Linda's point about monitoring it, I think is really critical. If there are these kind of scope creep kinds of incidents that we're having in the schools, having something where we have like referral type of data where we see, what was the violation, not students' names, but we can see the number of incidents and the nature of the incidents that were being I think that would be very interesting if this is, a concern that the board has, to get that kind of data. And I know it's an administrative burden, so I fully appreciate that. But, sometimes these things are necessary to address the concern.
I just think, so what if John Doe is a gang member? He needs to go to school. And he needs to wear clothes. So, someplace where I'm coming from, I have a little experience in this, is that my 22-year-old son was going through a program to better himself, and he became a mentor to other young men who were gang-related, who were, possibly going to be in conflict with each other. And so it was asked that, he doesn't wear any affiliated colors because, he's to remain neutral. So in that case, I can understand why a policy would go around colors, markings, things like that. But if they're in a gang, they're in a gang. They still need to go to school. And so I'm still not clear on what is going on out there where, we would be pulling somebody and, I can't see what that looks like.
Yeah, and just to add to that, I think, sorry to jump in, but I think, it feels like there's two different issues at hand. If they're in a gang, of course they can come to school. What we don't want is conflict to happen at school, right? So I tend to lean towards the language around gang-related apparel is meant to prevent incidents of violence that would happen in the school. That's what it's meant to do. Linda's point, I think, is extremely valid, but it's a different point, it feels like. That's a equity and racial equity training that needs to happen. That's not let's not prevent gang-related violence in the school. I'm sure you would be in favor of preventing any sort of violence that might happen in the school, but maybe there's additional training and supports that are needed for teachers to not, because that comment to me, I know you're saying that they're going to point to the dress code, but that feels like that's a whole different problem as opposed to a dress code problem,
Sure. I think it just shows too that it's kind of leaving the doors open for interpretation of it.
Yeah, and I was wondering how much the individual schools, the principals, or the parent committees, I've heard there were some recently, are setting their own. So, we've had these policies for a while, so what exactly are they setting?
Yeah, I don't know.
Because I heard, the schools are having this parent committee to set the dress code. Well, we did that a couple of years ago, so, may need to be altered, but what are they setting?
So I know that when IBL, at the beginning of the year, when they found themselves a little bit out of step with ours, they went to relook at it. We looked at it, and we looked at it with our council just to make sure that it was in consistent with our board policy, and that's where there was a little bit of discussion around abdomen versus midriff, kind of making it more gender neutral. But nobody, like, you can't be more restrictive than what our board policy has. Sometimes you can be a little bit more clear, but I do think kind of where the rubber hits the road is we can't go back to the way things were prior to the pandemic. And I think until we have time to work on some of the issues around why, making sure that there is a fair and equitable distribution of, if there really truly is an issue with dress, how does it get discussed with the student? How does it sounds like recording it is going to be an important thing for the board in terms of, making sure that we're aware of what these things are. I will have, I can't, I'm going to have to work with the principals around what's a reasonable way to do that. Because really, if it happens, the very best way is if there's something that's not within, like, first of all, you kind of set the guidelines, you inform people of it, you communicate what that is, positive, 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 here are all these things. Like, one of the things is around shoes, and we, I think, tried to avoid the word of appropriate shoes, but that the shoes are practical for the activity that they're doing, that they're both safe and practical. And then if there is something that's not quite right for some reason, that it happens in private, that conversation is supportive, not necessarily punitive. There is language in here that, if there is consistently a problem and it's not being addressed, that disciplinary can happen. But that's really kind of the end of the road. There should be several steps in there. So I know that we have some work to do with some staff, but I think what I would say is that, our teachers want, for the very most part, that's happening outside of the radar, where it could be, pants or something like, something that's a little bit more private. So how to record that.
So if we set the policy, shouldn't the principals go, okay, this is the policy? It seems like they're going, okay, now we need to set our policy.
Yeah,
So.
I wouldn't say that it's policy. It's more of like, here's the concrete version of that. This is what that looks like. And I'll be honest, we have not had time to talk to principals about that. Like, we really have not spent much time talking with them about that. So it would be something that we need to do.
Oh, so just after discussing and hearing everybody, the one word that I do see a problem with is deemed, D-E-E-M-E-D. Who is it that's going to deem that these clothes are gang related?
Right.
And so it's kind of leaving, a wide, broad, like, well, what does deem gang related clothes? And the other thing is, what if they're not gang related? And, we're, infringing on what they want to wear.
So it sounds like there's direction to take gang-related conversation out, like, so that's just not a part of our policy.
I would agree with that.
I would. So I will, so when we come back to you next time, we won't put this in consent. We'll have kind of another draft that would take that language out of there.
Right.
Thank you. Anything else on this topic? It's an important one, and if we take the game piece out, I think that will take out some of the elements. There is, in general, if we think about that the schools will not be more restrictive than what our policy is. I think that's where we have to be clear with folks.
Right.
Okay, so we'll bring that back and we'll put that on the regular agenda as opposed to the consent agenda, because I feel like we're not done with that yet. Anything else on that category?
Okay. Item 11, future agenda items.
Okay, our next meeting, for those of you who have not done a reorganization meeting, is is every year, once a year, we have a election on the board where we would elect the officers. We also will talk about committee assignments, and I'll try to refresh you on what some of those committee assignments are. We're just now planning the joint articulation meeting, which is a meeting with the water district, the city of Pacifica, and Jefferson Union High School District. So we'll probably have some openings there. But it's a time to try new things if you haven't. Linda's done a number of committees that were kind of in the background. I don't know if you talked about the the district reorganizations committee?
Yeah.
You didn't say anything about that? So I think that's an interesting thing. And then we talked about committee assignments. We do delegation of authority. We need to bring back the Educator Effectiveness Grant, and we will do so with subject-specific professional development, content-specific professional development. And then here's the part that Barbara has been worked really hard to help us organize 144 policies that we need to make up for. And so we will offer you a couple of, you all are groaning, but I think the cabinet members haven't quite even had a chance to catch up with that. And we're going to spend, just like everything else, about a year catching up on that. And so the strategy is there are some that are most urgent and some that are absolutely required that we're going to address as soon as possible. And then, is there anything else for the meeting in December?
Can I just have a request?
Mm-hmm.
Can we have a description of all the different committees? How many times they meet? Is it a morning or evening or afternoon meeting? Just so we're a little prepared for December 15th.
Sure. Yep. Nidhi, did you have something?
Just not necessarily for the December meeting, but in the future, I thought Linda's point was a really good one that she mentioned around looking at, I don't know how to do it, so I guess I'll just say what the total all-in funding looks like at each school. I don't know if it even makes sense to do per student by grade level, so I'm not going to make that kind of statement, but I do think it's important for an equity purpose to look at across the schools at some point.
Okay.
I have a request too.
Okay.
I know it's going to cost money, but I think that we should have a discussion about perhaps having summer school after looking at all the SIPSAs. Some of the kids are still going to need help. And we know that when there's summer, they lose, some of what they learn. So we don't want to take all these efforts that we're doing and then lose it over the summer, but rather, keep things going through the summer so we don't lose any of it. And so I'm wondering if we can have a discussion about having summer school. I don't think I've ever been here when there's been a summer school, but
Sunset Ridge had some last summer.
what is that? Like, could it be for all K through 8? Yeah.
So we absolutely can have the discussion, and I would ask that we have that discussion in January or February. I think where we would have to be very deliberate is that we would have to stop a number of our bond projects in terms of, because we have already looked at some of our summer opportunities and how to schedule them, and we have a number of new roofs and parking lots and other kinds of things. So why don't we have the conversation about fields in January, and then maybe we could have that conversation in February. But extra time is important, and so how could we provide that extra time, even if we can't do it during the summer? Or is there something that we could offer during the summer that doesn't involve a building or a roof? All things are possible. They're just not all possible at the same time. So I think that's a good conversation to have. Last year we deliberately did not have a big summer school, mostly because we didn't have staffing for that. And so why don't we have that conversation in February?
Thank you.
Okay. All right, thank you very much.
Okay. So we'll go ahead and adjourn the meeting at 9:36.